Good afternoon from the Swedenborg Society in Bloomsbury, London. I'd like to welcome you all to the first Luminary magazine interview of 2025. And today I'm in conversation with the inventor of Nano Soma, Dr Raghavan Ph.D. Welcome,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Raghavan. Now, first of all, I would like to say that as a journalist of more than 30 years, it's almost a miracle to be back broadcasting journalism as a result of an injury that I sustained from the AstraZeneca vaccine in 2021. And I have been on an extraordinary journey to survive vaccine-induced autoimmunity. And that led me to discover the work of Dr. Raghavan. And so we're here to discuss the idea of thinking differently, which is what Dr. Raghavan chose to do after getting a PhD in organic chemistry from Oregon State University. He's also a Master of Science from the Institute of Technology in India. You, Dr. Raghavan, you went into the pharmaceutical industry as a scientist. I'd like to talk to you about your journey growing up in India, studying organic chemistry, and how that led you then to break away from received wisdom. What were you interested in as a child growing up in India, growing up with as a Hindu, with a spiritual dimension being very important to your culture?
So, we grew up I grew up with my grandfather because my father was working in places where there were no schools in those days. India had just become independent and there were very few schools. So my grandfather was in Bangalore, so we grew up under the tutelage of my grandfather.
Are you saying that your grandfather actually taught you in the beginning? Did he teach you? Were you homeschooled?
He had not homeschool. I went to school.
Oh, you did go to school?
Yeah, I went to a Catholic school, actually St. Joseph's.
Right.
So, but at home, my grandfather was very well read in Sanskrit as well as in English, as a fluent English writer. His writing skills were excellent, and he would, when you read his letters, it was so punctual. Yeah, it put Oxford English professor to shame. It was so good. And he used to talk to us about history and philosophy and all that every day. He would have his dinner at 7:30, and we would sit next to the cot where he was about to go to sleep for half an hour.
And then he talked to you?
Yeah, talk to you about all kinds of subjects, from Napoleonic Wars to the First World War, and how some newspapers, one of our relatives, his relative, had a newspaper called The Hindu. It's a very well-known newspaper. How he would write about the war without knowing the information, by predicting what kind of strategy,
outcome or strategy
they would use. So all these things we learned. So a lot of things we learned also about the fact that there was very little of medicine in those days of the Western
so
time.
I wanted to ask you about Ayurveda, which has a huge influence on Indian culture and society. It's one of the great ancient medicines of the world, like Chinese herbal medicine, and we had Culpeper in England, who was very important. In fact, you would say that they are the foundation of original traditional medicine. And so were you treated Ayurvedically if you became sick?
Yeah, so for example, if you had let's say a wart, in fact, we would go, there are a lot of plants that grow wild in India, even in this, in those days in the streets.
You could just go and pick them. You could go and pick medicinal plants.
The leaf, you just snap the leaf and the white liquid would come out, then you would put it on your hand, wart, and rub it in, and the wart would be gone.
And who did this? Did your mother do this?
What?
Who knew to do this? Who knew to use these traditional remedies?
People around us knew.
They were passed down.
We are part of the environment where this would happen. For example, if you had a sty or a boil, which is very common in...
I had them as a child.
So we had a sandalwood tree in our house, and they would cut a piece of the sandalwood tree and make it into a paste and put it in, and then it would heal very quickly. It'll burst open the boil, and then you would do it.
So you grew up with this.
We grew up with traditional medicine in the absence of Western medicine.
So you didn't really go and see a doctor, if you will. You would always use traditional remedies.
We had a doctor, who was a family doctor, but he was more or less like he had 3 concoctions, pink, yellow, and orange.
And that was it.
That was it. And occasionally he would give us an injection, and very rarely, but mostly he did by talking to us, more than anything else.
Now, this grandfather, did he inspire you to study science at university?
I think it was.
Where did that interest come from to go to university and study science?
So, I graduated from high school '66. So the 12th year of school is called pre-university, before we go to the university.
Yeah.
So I had taken physics, chemistry, and mathematics, and
Why did you choose those subjects, Dr. Raghavan?
Because my sister was she was in mathematics, so just follow the rule, because
Were you good at those subjects at school?
In school, I was average. In college, what happened was when I did the university, pre-university, the highest grade I expected was in mathematics and physics, but it turned out to be chemistry.
That you excelled.
So I was in the top 5 in the university in chemistry, because 95 out of 100, So that's how I got into chemistry. So I took that as the clue that's what I'm supposed to do.
What else were you interested in? What were you really keen on and passionate about as a child growing up, and as a teenage boy? What were you interested in?
As a child, we would aspire to be. In '62, there was the war with China, I remember. So I wanted to be in the Air Force, but was not fit enough to even think about it. Just as one of the dreams.
What, to be a pilot? Did you want to be a pilot?
A pilot, but that never came to fruition. That was the first interest I think I had of becoming a pilot, but never happened.
Well, what were you really passionate about as a teenager, and what were your dreams? I mean, you landed up doing well in chemistry. Was that a bit of an accident that you landed up?
Yeah, the passion was slowly building. It didn't like it was anywhere and everywhere. It wasn't focused on anything. But I think the first chance to focus came before the pre-university, then I went into chemistry.
The thing is also, I'm unusual in that I knew I wanted to be a journalist from a very young age, but it's normal to not know what path you're going to follow.
Yeah, I was passionate about reading a lot of books, mostly non-fiction. And, in those days, we couldn't afford books, but we used to have the British Council, which so yes, we grew up with reading about Agatha Christie and the Famous Five and all that stuff. Reading was part of our passion.
Yeah, so you enjoyed that because, reading transports you. And
we didn't have TV or telephone or anything. So reading was, in that sense, I used to go to British Council every other week to get books and return it and come back. It was one of the highlights of the week to go to British Council.
Which people now would find so hard to understand, wouldn't they? That was so important, because that was a form of escapism.
Reading, I think, was very important. Reading was very important. My grandfather used to read. We had very precious books. In fact, I have a 1904 edition of Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, very jealous. I love Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, so all these things we have learned through my grandfather mostly. And my sister reads a lot. So it's very well read. So she used to read a hell of a lot of books. So
that rubbed off on you.
But
and have you retained that love of reading?
Yeah, I have a library full of books. I read from time to time, but occasionally, because I'm driving out or flying out here and there, reading is much harder. So now you have audible.com. You listen to the author.
Yes.
But I think
it's
reading
not the same as picking.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. There's something magical about sitting with a book, or going to a wonderful bookshop as well, where you can sit and read.
I used to go when in the US, I used to go to bookstores when there were physical bookstores, Barnes and Noble, so I could spend hours there.
Me too.
Yeah, that was one of my weekly trips to go and buy some book or the other. Now it's very hard to find physical bookstores.
Oh, well, I think they're returning, actually. I think people are getting sick of being corralled into doing everything online, and people are starting to appreciate
pleasure was to go to a bookstore.
Don't involve a screen.
And look at books, explore books. That was, for me, was a big kick.
So you went off to university to study chemistry. What was it like? And did you enjoy your
I enjoyed chemistry very much,
degree?
Especially I enjoyed organic chemistry very much. I became very good at it. So the next was, first was chemistry, and then narrowed to organic chemistry, doing experiments, smelling, chemicals, all
creating chemical reactions.
Yeah. So that became the passion. So I knew that was the place to go.
So did you enjoy your time with
Absolutely.
your first degree?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then why did you leave India? Why did you go to America? Was it because, India is now such a developed country and there are amazing opportunities in technology and science in India, but you did your first degree in the 70s, early 70s. Was it critical for you to go to America to do a PhD at that time?
So after I did my bachelor's, I did my master's in Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, which is like the MIT.
It's a really
MIT of India.
Top university.
And there was the people who graduated from that place. They all went to USA. So
why was that? Because it was
there wasn't the opportunity.
opportunity.
In those days, the only opportunity in India was to work for the government or work in the armed forces. And that was difficult because there are communities in India who are martial in nature, like the Sikhs in Punjab, who would be easily walk into the army, or the Nepalese Gurkhas who would walk into the army, and you and I had no chance because it was very more competitive to get into the army and the Air Force than to get into a school.
Right. Okay. So.
And also the science, we didn't have the equipment to do a lot of things.
At that time.
Yeah, at that time. So the only choice was to go overseas, and America was for us was the place to go to do research. Because everybody in our university went to America, at least 80% in those days.
Especially, I imagine, if they were studying science, because also the opportunities would be there.
Science and mostly engineering, yeah.
So did you apply to do your PhD at Oregon State University before?
No, I applied in many universities. I did get one in Wisconsin and Canada, and also in Oregon. I chose Oregon.
Why did you choose Oregon?
Well, because there was this guy who was a professor there, J.D. White, who's since passed away. He was born in India and he grew up in India, and then he was a professor there. So, the natural attraction.
Yeah.
And he was in the field of organic chemistry. So
was he Indian?
No. He was British.
British, right. What was it like for you culturally to move to America from India? How did you find it difficult to adjust to the culture?
In terms of academics,
food?
no. In terms of academics, no.
I can imagine not in academia, but in terms of culture.
Culture wasn't a big shock. It was just the increase, things that you took to get, which was difficult to get in India, were just right there.
I'm thinking more about the food, that in India you would still go to the market.
Yeah, we had a mass of Indian students in most universities who knew where to get what. So food wasn't the problem at all. At that time, there were...
Well, wasn't it hard to actually have the kind of food that you would eat at home in India, though?
No, not. I didn't find it in the US.
The American dream.
Yeah, we didn't eat much of American food in those days. So we cooked our own food, even as students. And most Indian students would room together, so each of us would cook each day.
Okay, so therefore... You were able to
we had traditional Indian food every day. Yeah.
Traditional food. And did you enjoy your time at Oregon?
Yeah, it's hard work, but...
What I want to ask you is how much influence at that time did the big pharmaceutical companies have on research in American universities?
That was all of it.
All of it.
All.
So their influence
Everybody
was,
who went
was
into chemistry,
pervasive.
everybody who went to chemistry or biochemistry or pharmaceuticals, his next, if he didn't get an academic job, he would go to the pharma. That was
right. So basically, there's only a choice of staying in academia or getting a job with big pharma.
Yeah. So academia was very tough to get into.
Yeah.
Because it was prestigious and so on. I never got an academic offer anywhere. So the next obvious thing was going to pharma.
Yeah. So, what was your first job working in big pharma after completing your PhD?
It was in New York, mid '80s. I joined Novartis. It used to be called Ciba-Geigy in those days.
I noticed that that you were a senior scientist at Ciba-Geigy.
Yeah. So we were in drug discovery and drug research. So mundane jobs, they're not difficult job. But
so was it not creative then? Because I understand, that chemistry can be incredibly inventive.
Creativity in pharma, at least when in Ciba-Geigy in those days, was not exactly discouraged. You couldn't outshadow your boss, so therefore it was impossible. He would see it as a threat. So therefore, your any creative were subdued until you got to the stage where you could, be creative.
It's very interesting about you scientists, because I realise there's an awful lot of competitiveness among scientists. They don't like one person to make a breakthrough. Yeah. They'll be jealous.
That's very true.
Sabotage your work. There seems to be an extraordinary level of Machiavellian machinations in the world.
Like, for example, one of the papers we published from Novartis, Ciba-Geigy, was something I did most of the work. But suddenly when the publications came, there were 4 or 5 people I didn't even know, including the boss, my boss, and somebody else.
Their name on the work.
So everybody was angling. So, it was not honest way of doing it, but that's the way it was. I mean, the HIV papers I did in the next job company was only 2 of us did the work. But if you look at the paper, there are 50 people. So we are somewhere in the middle. You got to look for our names.
And was the work very, very rigid in the way you were expected to conduct your line of thinking? Was that
extremely rigid?
Formulated.
It was. Everybody was. It's like, let's put it this way: dog eats dog attitude. Yeah. So little things like, meetings. Who was in the email, who was not in the email, became more critical than anything else. It was like reading, remember in old days when the Cold War was there, we used to read tea leaves. We did the same thing in Big Pharma, tea leaves. Oh, your name is not on the list, maybe he's not favored, things like that.
Not a great atmosphere to work in.
No, it wasn't. The very rare to see big breakthroughs because of the reasons I told you. You cannot overshadow your boss.
Yeah. That absolutely stifles creativity.
Yeah.
It's the same if you're working on a newspaper and you're basically told what to write.
See, that's why you see, till today, Pfizer has been around for 175 years. They haven't discovered a drug to cure a disease. I'm not talking about controlling symptoms, to cure a drug. So, and you see this across the board. For example, when Mevacor, so-called cholesterol drug, came from Merck, first people to do it. Every other company in America and the world was making something very similar to what Mevacor made, so that they can get past the patent. So the creative was stifled because everybody was going in the same road. Nobody was thinking of other roads.
Nobody was thinking differently. Right. So how long did you last in the world of big pharma before you had enough?
10 years.
10 years. That's a
by the end of the decade, 95, I was burnt out.
You worked for Boehringer. What were you?
Which?
Boehringer
Ingelheim.
Yeah, Boehringer Ingelheim.
Yeah, we worked on HIV and cold virus and so on. So.
And again, there's no cure for the common cold. Not from a pharmaceutical drug.
Cold is not a disease. It's your body's immune reaction to get rid of stuff in your body.
Yeah.
So what we do is technically, I mean, people do this all the time. Oh, you've got a cold, okay, give them antibiotics.
Which is a disaster, because the engine of the human being
And
is the gut biome.
Yeah, antibiotics go and destroy your immune system, gut
Yeah.
bacteria,
Yes.
which is 90% of the immune system. So the colds get worse and worse each year. And especially with children, they give amoxicillin that, you get the powder,
You're
add water.
weakening the innate immune system every time, because I've experienced.
You have to let the body work
antibiotic
through.
damage.
That's why you have an innate immunity and then adaptive immunity. But we stop that process.
You're suppressing it.
And so the body doesn't remember because we stopped it. So next one comes, the same thing happens. So the bacteria build resistance. So you get superbugs today, very, very common.
So you lasted 10 years in Big Pharma. Was there a eureka moment when you thought, I can't do this anymore and I want to use...
Yeah, I see
want
the
to use
90s.
my scientific abilities to go in a different direction?
Yeah, in the late mid-90s, I went to a meeting in New York City, and I don't remember where it was, probably Academy of Sciences. There was a guy, Dr. Felice, he must be way past 100 now. He made a statement which was, he said, in my lifetime, he said, there will be a product that will replace all drugs. A food ingredient that will replace all drugs. And the whole scientific crowd laughed, everybody clapped. But somehow it
registered with you.
Registered with me. I said, what if he's right? That was my question. Not that what if he's wrong, but what if he's right? After all, he was a MD, PhD from Harvard, and why would he risk to say these things? So your job is to be inquiring and to think, what if? I mean, that's how the greatest developments have come in science and medicine and in understanding our world. Yes.
It's all come from creativity and daydreaming and questioning the status quo.
So when that stuff was in my head, I could equate it to what happened in pharma, where we spend at least 10 years trying to prove it is not toxic. What if you remove the 10 years? We start with something that's already safe, which is the food ingredient. So it made sense to me. The next decade was for me to think about it, to actually reprogram myself to forget what I learned in pharma, except the techniques, but to think different, which is, in those days, Steve Jobs had this
But I wanted to ask you about your heroes. You've mentioned Steve Jobs to me during our many conversations in recent weeks. Did he inspire you to think differently?
Yeah, the three or four people who really I read, one is Einstein, of course. The second is Buddha, Gandhi, and then Steve Jobs, in that order. Einstein.
Who's the first one?
Huh?
Who's the first one?
The last one?
No, you said Steve
Einstein.
Jobs. Oh, yeah, Einstein, Steve
Buddha.
Jobs. Oh, Buddha, that's the one.
Gandhi, and then
Right.
Steve Jobs. Because Einstein said something very interesting in his speech, it was 1923 novel speech. He says, when a problem is too complex, the solution is very simple. So we need to go for a simple solution, not a complicated solution.
So that resonated with you.
Buddha always used to say, you want to become a wise man, you must question the answers. So you can question the answers that science or pharma is current at that time. That's how progress happens.
And the problem is when people are not allowed to question things. When we were told during the pandemic, this is the fixed position. Science is not fixed. And the whole point is it should be ever changing, ever questioning in order to find new
very
ideas,
transparent.
new solutions, and it must be transparent.
Yeah. See, in the 1920s, when quantum theory happened with the thing, it was totally transparent. So they made the biggest breakthroughs, everything else. People would sit and talk openly, not worried that somebody would steal, but each was an inspiration. But today...
It's such a shame, isn't it?
It's not the same. It's not the same.
Well, it's basically trying to enforce one line of thinking only. We have to resist that. How hard was it for you to get to the point where you were able to develop Nano Soma? How long did that take you, Dr. Raghavan?
The whole process took 12 years.
And what did it involve? What was the journey?
At each stage, so I began with the idea that there is possibility of product that can replace all drugs.
A safe product, a food
safe product. The second phase was, which is that product? So the realization comes when I knew there's a temple in India called Vaidishwara temple. Vaidya means
the doctor's temple.
Doctor's temple. It's 5,600 years old.
Did you know about this temple?
My uncle told me about it at that time. In 2001 or 2, I learned about it. Here they take jaggery, jaggery.
Which is sugarcane.
Yeah. And then they go into the temple and they put some salt in it and pray and say the disease goes away, and then put it in the water and goes into the tank. And
so the mythology that had grown up around the doctor's temple is that it doesn't contain bacteria. It's been tested, hasn't it?
Some people have tested it,
and
not me.
No,
the people,
bacteria. But also the idea that it cures 448
diseases. The number of diseases that can cure. So people would laugh at it, but the question was, how did they come up with the number? See, this is my question. And once I knew it was sugarcane, I knew what it was, because this is very common in India. My grandfather always would take us out, and when we wanted juice, we wouldn't buy packed juice or something. There'll be a sugarcane vendor, because we cut sugarcane and grows in India. We'll crush it, and then you get the juice, you drink it.
Yeah.
And he always told me it was the healthiest juice in the world, and it was in the back of my...
Your grandfather told you, right.
But it was in the back of my head, but I never made the connection.
Until you looked at the
I got here.
temple.
Then I made the connection. The next stage was the requirement that, when nature evolves, it gives all of us, including every mammal and every species in the world, the tools of survival. For example, porcupine, how it defends itself. The tiger knows how to defend itself. The elephants know how to defend themselves. Man was also given the chance, and that was in the ingredient, an ubiquitous food, which is in sugarcane, but also in rice, wheat.
And this is the polycosanol.
Yeah, polycosanol.
Which is a waxy substance. Yeah.
It's on the skin of everything. That is why, if you look at nature evolution, the largest organ in any mammal is the skin. It's there for a reason.
Yeah, it's protective, but also it can be used for detoxification.
Also, it repels water. I mean, imagine plants, which will soak up the water. They will just bloat and burst open. So even the plants, it's a protective. Similar to polycosanol, they have waxes. The bark of a tree, for example, peat moss contains polycosanol. Grapes, we talk about grapes. Grapes is one of the highest concentrations of polycosanol. So that's why the French always talk about the French paradox. They drink wine because it's fermented. It contains traces of polycosanol. So that's the second proof that there is something about this product.
So then, did you start to look at the properties of the polycosanol? When did you start?
See, the polycosanol was actually discovered in Okinawa by the Japanese. They showed it reduces cholesterol. So,
when did they do this?
That's 81, 82. Then the Cubans, we have a sugarcane industry, they were banned from importing Western drugs. But then they had sugarcane. So they worked a lot in polycosanol.
So they had a lot of scientists actually looking at polycosanol.
Yeah. They were the first.
Out of necessity.
Yeah. Because that's the only way. Substitute for, in fact, they're lucky because they didn't have to take the statin drugs. So, but the only one mistake they made was, which is where I was able to think, was that they were not able to solubilize it. That means make it water soluble. You see, the reason it's very important is because your body is 60 to 70% water. But if you calculate in terms of water molecules, it's like 99% of your body's water molecules. greater than 99%. So any product that you make
has
to have that characteristic, because the body then accepts you.
Yeah.
And this we are not doing with the drug they discover today. Most of them not soluble, you inject it and all kinds of things. And the body usually rejects it. And that's why life began in the ocean. And then we evolved in the womb, which is water.
Yeah.
So we have to live in a world of water. And so the product that you make has to be incompatible with nature.
Completely compatible with the composition of the body.
Got it.
Yeah. So how hard was it for you to achieve that?
Well, it wasn't difficult because the technology was there, but nobody thought of doing it. And we were able to do it. A friend of mine in Switzerland in 2008. Within 3 weeks, we had the answer. Because once I knew this was the product, the next was to solubilize it.
Yeah.
And we did that.
And then let's talk again about the importance of water, because water isn't equal. Water, if it's going to be beneficial to us as human beings, needs to be pristine. You know, I went to an extraordinary conference in Austria in 2019 where I met professors from all over the world who were studying the properties and energetic properties of water. And some of them were skeptics in the beginning until they actually started to look at water and how you could change it.
I'll give you a simple,
by playing it music.
Yeah, just to give you an example of water. There is a girl who did some work for the Intel science competition in America, high school girl. She would put the water in a microwave for 2 minutes, cool it, and then feed it to the plants. The other plant she wouldn't microwave it, and she was able to show that the plants that were not microwave grew much faster and better than the ones that were microwave. So there are a lot of interesting properties of the water.
What did it do? What did the microwaving do to the water?
It rearranges.
It completely changes the composition, the molecules.
It changes the structure of the water completely. Yeah. How the water is bound to each other. There is a pattern, and the most effective pattern is when the molecules, there is a symmetry. See, the world loves symmetry. That's why when we made this product, we make this in such a way that the peak between the smallest, largest is symmetrical. If you look at our patent, you will see that the molecule is symmetrical, the peak. The size of the peak is symmetrical, it's very critical. If it is broad, it's not totally useless.
Are you talking about the water now? The water is...
No, the product in water.
In water is symmetrical. Right. Now, didn't you look at a lot of water in order to find the right water to suspend the polycosnol?
Yeah,
but this was really critical. Because again, the body would reject it if it wasn't pristine.
Yeah, see, the way it's written in the Rig Veda, it says, pristine water, blessed by the Agni means the sun, which means immediately we knew it's something to do with vitamin D. That's the pristine in Sanskrit, because the original language was written in, there are 200 words that describe water.
That's how
260 to be more precise.
They obviously understood how precious and important water.
So this word pristine, according to my person who is well versed in the Odas, I consulted, he said, is the melting snow of Mount Kailash, where Shiva supposedly lives, Shiva. This temple in South India, where I spoke, Vaidishwaran temple, is also a Shiva temple. And the water is the melting snow of Mount Kailash, which is actually in Tibet. So there's no chance I can go there and get the water. But the product works at such low quantity, at picogram levels in cells. The water has to be very pristine. If we have tried water from India, and
did you try? Have you actually tried it with tap water out of India? Water that's been
the peak
processed and treated,
we can
cleaned.
make the product. We can make the product,
but it wouldn't have the same effect, would it?
It'll have some, but not all. The peak broadens, so we need to get the right one. And I just thought of Switzerland, because the melting snow and clean, environment is clean, and that's how we got to Switzerland.
They have have some amazing spring water. There's a company called Grander Water, and they have analysed their water, and it has been found to be full of energy, in complete contrast to water that's been treated. And municipal water that's been treated with chemicals is almost dead.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it makes sense that water is life and water is energy, and yet that your product has an energy.
Yeah, we have done dark field microscopy. I believe you've seen the video.
We've got the beautiful video of Nano Soma that glitters under the microscope.
Yeah, so it's full of life. Yeah. That's amazing. That we were shocked when they first saw it, but you wouldn't see it with other things.
So So you put Nano Soma into production in 2008, and one of the things we should talk about is how it's changed your life, along with the lives of thousands of other people who've discovered it and taken it, often by word of mouth, because your work has been censored. Because as I've discovered, I don't need to take any vitamins or supplements, and I've been on a whole, as you've seen, my medicine cupboard, I was prescribed about 10 or 11 supplements a day for vaccine injury to alleviate my suffering, but I wasn't recovering from vaccine-induced autoimmunity. But after 2 months, the only product I take now is Nano Soma.
No, first, the two of us, first sample we made, the two of us, me and my Swiss colleague, Dr. Muller, and we have been taking it ever since. We are the longest users of Nano Soma. So we started way back in 2008. Before 2008...
What was your health like before 2008?
I had this and that every day, some problem, other headaches, cold, all kinds of things, The first thing I noticed was that all my headaches went away. All my headaches. No more headaches. The second thing I noticed was my energy level. I played badminton in those days.
I should tell you that Dr. Raghavan plays very competitive badminton in New York at his club for up to 12 hours a week. And you come across as a scientist with an extraordinary level of dynamism and energy, which I think you absolutely attribute to having been on your own inventions since 2008.
People began to notice that because in the club, nobody survived over 55 years.
So you're the oldest member of
I'm the
club
oldest one today.
At 73,
73, I'm the oldest one. So, wow, they said, this guy is doing something different.
And they all wanted
I didn't tell them.
They all clamoring to take
They wanted to find out the secret, what's your secret? And then somebody, did a Google search at those days and found out about the product. We call this metadicol. That's the original name I gave.
I love. We should explain that metadicol is actually Dr. Raghavan's witty anagram of methodical backwards, which is what Nano Soma does. It very methodically improves and restores health by triggering the body to repair itself.
So this is it's pretty much water. Okay, you can see it's clear. I just got a sample. So basically, the way you use it is spray it in your mouth. You can spray it anywhere. You can spray it in your eyes. Yeah. It's totally safe. You need to drink 25,000 bottles before it gets toxic. Then you can't drink that in one day.
That would be a lot. Even if you bathed in it, you'd be all right. But let's just go back to the effect on you and on longevity. You've had your telomeres are getting longer.
Yeah. So one of the things we did was it came to be that people, the United States companies like Google and all these Silicon Valley billionaires spend billions of dollars on living longer. They haven't succeeded. So I said, I must look at my telomere. Telomere is, for those of you who don't know, if you have a shoe and the shoelace at the end are two plastic tips, that's the telomere. And each time the cell divides, that telomere gets shorter and shorter. And therefore the complete protein or something is never made because it's not the same size. But if you can keep the size the same or increase it, you will live longer. So I found, for example, for my age, it should be, average was 0.88. One is 100%.
At your age?
Yeah.
At your
biological age was exactly, for my biological age, was about 0.88.
Yeah.
But mine turned out to be 0.99, which makes me 15 to 18 years younger, biologically, not chronologically.
Yeah.
So
in the way that your cells are aging. Yeah, the way your body is aging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can technically, we have a lot of people who have done other studies and shown that within 3 months, you decrease your age by 5 years.
One of the things that I found very interesting from being on Nano Soma, apart from the fact that it's really helped me with Sjogren's syndrome, which I was diagnosed with as part of my vaccine injury, where you can no longer make saliva or moisture correctly in the body, is that it also reduces and melts away anxiety and stress. Maybe because it also helps to optimize sleep. One of the very interesting things is if you take Nano Soma just before going to bed, it enables you to sleep deeply and to experience the repair sleep, which is so critical.
So the key here is one of the most important discoveries in our patent, which we can make a claim, is that it increases vitamin C in our body.
So it replaces vitamin C, doesn't it? It makes its own version of vitamin. It makes its own version of vitamin C. Is that right?
Yeah. So what it is all mammals, other than the chimpanzees and our nearest neighbors, we cannot convert glucose, sugar, into vitamin C. They can. For example, if there's a goat, you inject the goat with malaria parasite and measure the vitamin C level, it goes up 75-fold. It's very powerful. So if we could convert sugar into vitamin C, voila, there's no problem with diabetes, other things. That's how our product works in diabetes, because we are producing vitamin C.
And vitamin D.
But the way it produces vitamin C is different. It converts the waste vitamin C in the body, which is useless, which should be excreted out, into active vitamin C. That's the way it makes it.
We should explain exactly how a Nano Soma works. So basically, it attaches to the receptors in the body, which are the guardians of the cell.
Yeah.
Could you explain that?
Yeah. In each cell in the body, you have a cell which is the outer membrane, which is like polycosano's outer membrane.
Yeah.
And inner membrane, you have a small. Inside it, you have the mitochondria, which is the power plant of our body.
The nucleus of the cell?
And then you have the nucleus. The nucleus contains the 23 chromosomes from my father and mother, so there are 48 nuclear receptors, 48 nuclear receptors.
In the human body?
Any signal, let's say the body wants to make insulin, it gets a signal from the body. And it goes and activates a nuclear receptor. And I think it's in chromosome 8 or 12. It produces insulin. It actually makes mRNA, which then makes protein, which is insulin. Like this, you have for thyroid hormones, estrogen hormones, all those things. A signal has to be sent. So this is the power plant. This is what I call as the operating system of our body.
It's like an amazing piece of software.
So we found that metadicol and Nano Soma activates all these nuclear receptors, which has never been done before. So you therefore have control of the operating system. And that leads to homeostasis. That's why it works on multiple.
And homeostasis is about balance, which is what Gandhi talked about. 80 years ago, he was talking about a state of ease, that the body is it's a mirror of the outside world, a microcosm inside the body and out, that they mirror each other. And that's because we're all part of one ecosystem, which is where we've gone wrong in medicine. The idea that we have to use a drug that suppresses symptoms rather than dealing with the innate immune system, which is self-repairing. Isn't that what your
this was all
discovery
about,
is all about?
It was mostly driven by Western civilization. It's all about money.
I was going to say, when did we lose the plot? When did we go wrong and create this monstrous model of disease, basically, which is the opposite of what Gandhi talks about in a state of balance and ease? Where did we go down that route
Rockefeller was
of
the
disease management?
Yeah, Rockefeller was the oil king in America, John D. Rockefeller. He made gasoline, but there were other things left over.
The byproduct, the waste.
Yeah, so he wanted to do something with it, and he found that, okay, you can make aspirin, the chemistry was developing. So he created, he had a guy who was not qualified called Flexner, and he produced something called the Flexner Report, where they wanted to standardize medical education and everything. So Rockefeller, with his money, bought out the AMA and literally banned universities from teaching other forms of medicine.
So that's when the corruption and the control started.
It was about corruption and increases business.
And creating one dogma.
One dogma. The dogma was, the pharma would make the drug and you would buy it. The doctors they were already trained in a certain way of thinking.
We've got to a stage where doctors are not treating people to recover from disease. It's purely about keeping people stuck in a state of disease, which, I've got the figures here, which are shocking, as Robert Kennedy Jr. has been sounding the alarm for many years, and he's now been sworn in as the new health secretary, and hopefully this will lead to a revolution in returning populations to health, not just in America, which is where the problem started, but around the world. But, autoimmune disorders up by 1,600% since the 90s. That's an extraordinary figure. Alzheimer's up by 299%. Diabetes, 305%. Fibromyalgia, 7,272%. ADHD, 819%. Autism spectrum disorders up from the 90s to the present by 2,094%. That's not an accident. This is about the storm of misuse of pesticides, pollution in our environment, appalling levels of pollution, pesticides in the air, in our food, and then also ultra-processed food, which is what Kennedy has been talking about for decades, and nobody was listening until now. Do you think that we are at a stage where things will change? That people are open to the idea of a new age of health, of getting rid of chronic disease? Yeah,
there comes a time in life when you have tried everything. For example, just what you were talking about, statistics there. The United States spends $600 billion on hypertension alone, heart disease.
Well, it's bankrupting America, isn't it?
So $600 billion we spend. It's a lot of money. And there are 124 drugs to treat hypertension. And I always have this question that if even one of those drugs worked, we would wipe off hypertension. The fact that the 124 tells you, we don't know what we're doing. There's something wrong with this approach. It's very clear.
But it's become so rigid, isn't it? Yes. And the only way is to smash it and start,
it's very, very rigid.
Start again.
Very rigid.
The dogma has just completely taken over.
Every doctor I've spoken to, they don't want to believe, but they would still love to. Many of my friends, they love my product, but they cannot prescribe this product or tell people to buy the product because the medical society will say, hey, it happened during COVID when some doctors were giving hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin. They were stopped.
Well, they lost their license.
They lost their license.
It was terrible, but they prescribed.
So it's a very rigid system.
Which is completely toxic. Yeah. The system is utterly rotten and corrupt.
See, this is what it is. The other thing that is really causing havoc is sugar, and that's why.
Let's talk about.
So that's why when I was doing this research. There was another person independently doing research thinking the same way, that he needs to, nature, when it develops a product like a mango or a grape, that is the complete.
Well, my functional doctor put it right. He said, eat the whole orange.
Yeah.
That's, we have been sold this myth of convenience, and that is a disaster for humanity. We need to get back to eating whole foods.
So what he did was in Colombia, Mr. Gonzalez and his family, their sugar mills, they created this product called polycane.
This is in Colombia.
Yeah. In fact, it's produced. This comes from Costa Rica. This can, revolutionize healthy, because this contains.
It contains the same polycosanol, and it's in its whole state. Can you explain why that's beneficial, Dr. Raghavan?
Yeah, because they have. See, polycosanol is a wax. It's not soluble in water, but they have made a sugar which is. Where the polycosanol, when you put it in the water, it dissolves. That means the polycosanol is in the water form.
And so then it's absorbed.
So there is small amounts of polycosanol, enough, because my polycosanol we have shown in nano form. See, nano is nothing like putting salt in water. The salt is very small molecule, becomes nano. So it's not a big, nano means small, that's all.
Yeah, but small is very, very interesting.
Yeah, because it's a high surface area.
But it has all sorts of extraordinary effects at small scale.
Yeah,
I was reading about how gold is different at nanoscale. It completely changes the colour.
Correct.
And that the great artists who worked on the cathedrals in the medieval age were working at nanoscale because they needed to use tiny amounts.
And we have done the study in Switzerland, people. So this product has half the glycemic index of this product is the same as an apple. So when you take this product, your sugar doesn't spike up. It's safe for diabetes. I mean, just imagine a world where Coca-Colas and all the sweets you make are made with this. And sugar is the biggest crop in the world. It's a $400-500 billion industry, retail.
I had to go at baking some muffins with polycane. I can say that it tastes delicious.
It's no different than a brown sugar.
Yeah, but it tastes absolutely delicious. It tastes of licorice and chocolate. And yeah, I actually like to just dip my fingers in it. It's so
I think
delicious.
if this product, once it gets the traction with our product for the disease and this product for the rest of it, so that the maintenance dose is always getting with whatever food you eat, it becomes healthy. Because what is happening is this sugar spikes you get with Coke and Pepsi. See, the way they make some of these drinks is they add a lot of salt to preserve the liquid, the cola. When they add a lot of salt, it becomes very bitter. So then they add a lot of sugar to overcome the bitterness. So you get a high salt and a high sugar.
Well, it's exciting because you'll be able to have your cake and eat it. And I think there are an awful lot of people.
This, in fact, is probably what they meant when they said the temple in India, they made the sugar cane. This is probably the sugar cane they meant. So for me, the cycle is complete. The sugar and what in the sugar makes this possible. And that's what Nano Soma or Metadicol is about.
What is your dream for Nano Soma? Because I have read hundreds and hundreds of testimonials from people who have taken Nano Soma, and it's had life-changing effects on all kinds of diseases and imbalances in the body. And my own journey to recover from life-threatening vaccine injury, it's really, really helping me. It's very, very gentle, but it's profound, and each day I feel stronger. So what are your goals and dreams for Nano Soma to reach humanity? Because you've faced a lot of censorship.
Yeah, we need people to get away from the thinking that only pharma can provide the solution, as I said.
Well, that's just brainwashing.
That's brainwashing.
But also, they don't want you to succeed because it puts them out of business. You don't need all these supplements. We're talking about industries that are worth billions, that
trillions.
Prey on people's trillions, and prey on people's desperation. Because we are living in a diseased world.
But you see, the fear is, this is where Steve Jobs comes in. He was ready to get rid of his products to replace with a better product. You see, I have written, when I got my patent and before, to every pharma company in the world. Nobody replied. They could have licensed it and taken it to the rest of the world. But I think governments looking at trying to cut costs, the more important thing is to prevent disease. And this is where this product comes in.
But this also gives self-determination, empowers the individual to restore their health. Of course, you have to live a healthy lifestyle as well, but it gives you back medical freedom, independence, and that is exciting.
We need to have alternates to medical health, medical medicine, just not pharma. They don't have the answers. We have seen it. We have seen this. So we need to look for a better approach. And Nano Soma is one of them. I'm sure there will be others that come along, will do other things. But I think mine is the first step. We have shown its effect on so many diseases.
Do you have plans to develop this in other ways? Are there other things that you can do with Nano Soma?
Yeah, no, we can put this in water instead of drinking just water. Put a small amount of Nano Soma in the water, so every day people drink water.
Yeah.
So,
as opposed to putting fluoride in,
yes,
which they denied for decades. That,
we can use the water. We can use this put in water in agriculture, and the animals will drink this water, so that they don't need to take so many antibiotics, because our product is very powerful antibiotic.
Do you think that Robert Kennedy Jr. will inspire a revolution in agriculture, that we've reached rock bottom with really coming close to poisoning our world, this beautiful green blue planet?
I'm sure he spent a lot of time. He spent time to clean up the Hudson River and all these things. I think he's learned a lot. So he speaks my language.
He's a very spiritual person, as well as somebody who's highly intelligent, who has. He has an extraordinary track record of taking on big pharma and big agriculture and winning. He won the landmark.
Yeah, his Children's Health Alliance is an amazing story.
Yeah, it is.
And he also went through a lot in life, in drug addiction, alcohol addiction, all that. He overcame that.
Yes, but that came out of the tragedy of the assassination of his father and his uncle. I mean, how do you deal with that as a child?
And also the other people in the family who died tragically, So there's been a lot of tragedy in the Kennedy family. So
there has, and a lot of Catholicism too, which makes an interesting combination. But it is about forgiving yourself and finding a spiritual dimension, which he's talked a lot about. That's what's kept him going, in order to take on these vested interests. So are you excited about America now, about all the changes?
As Steve Jobs said, people keep doing the same thing again and again and expect a different result. That's what Einstein said. That's sheer madness. But when you think different, things happen. I mean, even Einstein, if you see the first 15 years when he discovered relativity theory, the whole entire British Physical Society didn't want to even invite him to England to speak. It's only in 1919 or 1920 they invited the first time, when somebody proved that light does bend, and in Africa, 2 British physicists were able to show that. Then he got credibility. So new ideas.
They're always resisted, aren't they? That's the nature.
New ideas in humanity, human.
That we are stubborn.
We are very stubborn. We are trained in a way. That's where spirituality comes in. Openness. People say, I'm open, but you have to be open to ideas, however crazy it may be, because you learn. And, but more important thing you have to know is the law of nature. You observe it. How does nature work? I mean, how is it able to do things so efficiently? Like photosynthesis, for example. We are not able to reproduce photosynthesis.
It's been absolutely wonderful and fascinating to talk to you today. I think now we would like to open the floor for people to ask questions.
Sure.
And, if anyone wants to ask me about my journey to recovery as well, I'm happy to answer questions about that. So could we see if we have people who would like to ask questions?
First thing you need to do is to get in the sun every day, 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Expose 80% of your body so the vitamin D level is always high. The second thing is to avoid all the junk food. eat at the right time. So that alone, you will see a change in your immunity.
Could you mention the longevity hotspots and how important vitamin D is? Getting out first thing in the morning, even for 10 minutes, is important.
So when the body produces vitamin D by exposure to the sun, what you have is you produce water-soluble vitamin D, whereas the pill you take is fat-soluble. So it has to go through your stomach and intestine before it's released. So this is the advantage of being in the sun. People, if you look at the map of this world, 77% of the world's population lives in areas where there is 300 days of sunshine.
Could you say where some of those areas are, Ragha? What countries are the vitamin D hotspots where people have
there is
access
something
to?
called the blue zones.
Yes, the blue zone.
So there are 5 blue zones in the world. One is Okinawa in Japan. There's a lot of sunshine there. The second is Sardinia in Italy. The third one is one of the Greek islands. The fourth is in Costa Rica. And the fifth is in Loma Linda, California, where actually the Seventh-day Adventists are there. They eat vegetarian food and there's a lot of sunshine. And that gives you an idea. In all these 5 places called blue zones, there are a lot of people who live above 100 with a quality of life. So the key is the sun. That's why NASA looks for other planets or other areas like the Earth where there is a central star. Because without sunlight, there's no life possible.
Remind me of the interesting story you told me about your dog, about your puppy, and how the puppy knows instinctively to go into the sun, and then tell me what happens next.
Yes, the first dog I had, is a Shih Tzu. I noticed that during winter he would follow the sun. This was just before I was discovering Nano Soma, like 2005. It was curious. The second thing I also noticed was when he went to poop or do his daily rituals, it would always be the north-south or south-north axis. That's the Earth's magnetic pole. They can feel the magnetic poles.
They can sense it.
We have grown up not to feel anything. And that I think is a critical difference. I mean, we also, for example, my grandfather always said, you always, in Hindu tradition, sleep north to south. Align yourself with the magnetic field.
Right.
Yeah. And when the person dies in India, the head is turned around, so it faces south to north, depending on the magnetic field. So you have to align yourself with the magnetic fields, because your molecules in your body also align with the magnetic field.
Your puppy would go out and sunbathe, and then it would lick its paws. Why did it lick its paws, Dr. Raghavan?
What?
The dog licked its paws after sun.
Yeah, see, the dog, even cats do that. When they hit the sun and then they start licking, and everybody says, stop licking, stop licking. But actually, that's where they produce their vitamin D. They don't produce inside the body like us. They produce this in the paws, and they lick it and take it into the system. And
so they have evolved to remember that knowledge, whereas human beings have lost it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we don't go in the sun. You see, if you look at
Well, people have been discouraged, haven't they?
Even today,
it's so important.
In Botswana and Tanzania, there are tribes whose vitamin D level is over 100. I forget the number. Their blood pressure is 110/70, very normal. But the hunter-gatherers, they were in the sun, high levels of vitamin D. If you look at the vitamin D in the rest of the world, it's Middle East is below 10 or 15 average.
Really?
Yeah, because they have the sun, but they cover themselves. In the Western countries, it's the same thing.
The Northern Hemisphere, where
Western
we are.
Hemisphere. Yeah. The reason is they don't go in the sun. But if they go in the sun in the summer or spring or whenever, they put this SPF, which blocks all the UV light. So you don't produce vitamin D.
Yes, I mean, it's a disaster. It's not good for your bones either. Sun is good for us.
I think we have to use the tools that nature gave us for survival and good health. We are not using it. We are instead, every problem we have, we run to the doctor. No, it's not necessary. There are a lot of things.
But we've forgotten how our bodies work.
Correct.
We've also been actively encouraged to not understand how our bodies work. So if we can regain that knowledge,
Correct.
then
It's an old knowledge, but we have to follow.
It's evolutionary knowledge. Yeah.
We have to follow the laws of nature, like it or not. You can violate it for a little while, but afterwards it's going to come back and bite you. It's like, CO2 levels. Everybody's trying to control CO2 levels, but what they don't understand is when Earth evolved, the CO2 levels were 15 times higher than it is today. Life evolved.
Oh, we need CO2.
Because CO2 in photosynthesis will give you oxygen. If you reduce CO2, you lose oxygen.
We won't live.
Yeah.
We won't survive.
So this whole idea that CO2 is responsible for warming is nonsense.
Yeah.
We can kill TB because we already done the tests, and my colleague in India, Mr. Murali Sharma, he has given to a lot of patients, and we have done the in vitro tests in Virginia as well as in the TB centers in India, and showed that it can kill TB, and we've had results from it. We haven't published it, but it's there.
Will you look to publish?
Well, we get enough more patients.
Yeah.
Because there are many kinds of TB, MTB and other virulent forms of TB. TB has mutated.
And one thing I didn't ask you about is this idea, that we have to be afraid of viruses when we are absolutely drowning in viruses. Viruses are everywhere, aren't there?
Which?
Viruses. We are surrounded by viruses, and we are made up of bacteria. We shouldn't be afraid of viruses.
Microbes.
Microbes.
So our own body, we have 100 trillion cells. We have 10 trillion human cells and probably 100 trillion microbes in our body. Some are, most of them are benign, but there are some that are virulent. When a drug comes in, it kills off the good microbes and lets the ones that are resistant.
The bad bacteria proliferate.
Multiply. And now they have found out that your gut bacteria is responsible for 90% of your immune system. So that's why you have to design a drug or anything that you take to cure disease which does not affect the liver, because the liver has 500 different functions, and the gut bacteria, which is 90% of your immune system. So people take antibiotics, they don't understand that in 1 week, your entire gut bacteria is destroyed. And it takes 2 years for it to recover to get the diversity of bacteria.
I have been in recovery from antibiotic damage. Yeah.
Next question.
We have published all that work. The most important thing are the nuclear receptors, starting from vitamin D receptor. There are 48 of them to progesterone receptor, estrogen receptor. All these are affected by Nano Soma. They binds to all these receptors, and that triggers production of mRNA and proteins, which our body needs. And we have many other receptors, including toll receptors, which are responsible for innate and adaptive immunity. We also affect sirtuins. Sirtuins are the ones that are in the mitochondria that make our body work. So all this is published work. You can, if you go to researchgate.net and put metadicol, you will get all my publications. Yeah, we have done a few patients in India who have the carcinoma, and we have even have proof that it reversed it. In fact, I would suggest you go to talk to our colleague in India, Murali Sharma, and nanosutra.com in India, and send him an email. He'll be able to send you more information on it. See, the key is with sugar is when you take sugar, there is a spike in your sugar level, very rapid, and that triggers the body to produce other things to correct it, including inflammatory cytokines. But with polycane, the fact that the sugar level will not go up right away.
Because it's a whole sugar.
So there are less of cytokines being produced to maintain the sugar level. And polycane contains my product. So obviously, it'll prevent many of the diseases that Nano Soma does. over a long time, not in the short time. This is a more concentrated solution, whereas the amount in polychain is much smaller. But we have had reports from people who use polychain that some of their like things like hypertension has improved, but no large-scale study has been done.
Okay, I would like firstly to thank my guest, Dr. Raghavan, for being my interview subject today, and it's very exciting to get back to doing what I love. I would like to just tell you a little bit about the magazine. I relaunched 5 months before I was injured by the AstraZeneca vaccine in May 2021. I was 5 months into a successful launch of my slow arts and culture magazine, which I would love you to have a look at. It's at www.theluminariesmagazine.com. We are a completely slow, independent journalism magazine. I have a 30-year track record as a national newspaper journalist in the UK, read by millions of people at the Times newspaper. I left national newspapers because of the levels of corruption that I just wasn't prepared to work in that kind of environment where I was being asked to compromise my integrity. I absolutely love journalism and storytelling with a passion, and that's why I have set up the Luminaries to be able to do that. We cover the arts, film, drama, slow food, organic food, championing regenerative agriculture. And one of my greatest passions is interviewing cultural icons, of which Dr. Raghavan is my latest subject. So I would love you to look at the magazine, sign up, become a supporter. There are going to be many more interviews. I am looking to do many more things in collaboration with Dr. Raghavan. My dream is to make a documentary film about his invention and his work. So watch this space. We hope to do that. And I should also say a big thank you to Valeria, the student filmmaker who has basically masterminded this recorded and live streamed interview today. We're going to have a beautiful recording. So if you actually want a recording of the interview, you can email me at luminarymageditor.aj@proton.me or contact me via the magazine, and we can send you a specially edited recording which will now be put together by the talented students at Rain Dance Film in London. And a big part of the magazine is actually mentoring, collaborating and working with the next generation of students from journalism to film. That is something I really love to do. And I'm sure you know about the state of journalism globally, that there has been a capture of journalism by the deep state. And we need more independent journalists, and that's what I stand for. We need your help and support. You can also find me on X at Luminaries Magazine. And obviously I am still in recovery and I'm getting stronger every day, thanks to Dr. Raghavan's invention and Nano Soma and the extraordinary journey I have been on to come back from this. It was existential. So it's been really exciting to host this interview from the Swedenborg Society in London. This is a museum which celebrates the work of another original thinker, a scientist and philosopher from the 18th century who also dared to think differently and was really interested in homeopathy and natural medicine. So I hope you've really enjoyed this broadcast, and I hope that you will come back for more. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much from London, Bloomsbury.